The U.S. and China economic fates may be intertwined, but that has not stopped a military confrontation. This past weekend, a U.S. Navy ship was surrounded by Chinese military ships and others, with the Chinese claim that Americans were in its exclusive economic zone. The U.S. says no, not the case. It was in international waters. Antonio Morales-Pita is back with us, a professor of economics at DePaul University. Professor, always nice to see you. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Military tensions. What about economic tensions between the U.S. and China these days?
They are very strong also. To start with, 2/3 of the U.S. reserves in the world are in China.
Big buyer of U.S. bonds.
Yes, precisely. The deficit that we have in the budget is basically covered or supported by China.
Right.
So this is our dependence. But at the same time, the fact that China has so large reserves of U.S. dollars make them interested in having an appreciated dollar in their reserves.
And we certainly have seen the dollar move higher against international currencies. But what about the Chinese economic situation? Let's take a look at where the gross domestic product stands in China. What had been just a couple of years ago of a double-digit growth rate, now still positive, but about half the growth rate it was just two years ago.
And the reason is precisely the effect of the American slowdown on China. Why? Because 20% of China exports come to the U.S. Therefore, if the demand of the U.S. weakens, China is directly affected.
And Beijing and the others, right?
Yes, it's simply the best customers that they have. So that is really affecting them. Affecting not only their exports to the U.S., but also foreign U.S. investments in China also being affected because they are basically geared towards exports to the U.S.
That has been the growth engine within China, but
right.
I was over there in October. There was a lot of hope within China that it could stimulate internal demand to try to take over some of the growth prospects that the exports had provided, but so far that's been very, very difficult.
There is a certain promise that the Chinese government is doing in that sense. As far as I know, until yesterday at least, there is no concrete new way out. I mean, they are talking about it. It's going to be huge,
right?
But how is it going to be broken down?
Well, let's take a look at the employment situation in China. We think we have a problem here in the U.S. with 3.5 million fewer jobs today than 14 months ago. In China, this year alone, the labor force is expected to grow by 24 million people, and the economy is likely only to create 9 million new jobs. So a significant amount of joblessness happening in China, and especially among younger workers at this point. Is this a threat to the Chinese way?
Of course it is. It is because in the U.S., if our unemployment rate grows to 10%, which would be a lot, there will be no collapse of the American system, of the American capitalism. There will be no collapse. There is no threat. But in China, if the growth goes under 6% growth, 6%, this means a debacle. I mean, the political outburst that can take place in China, even this year, we have 3 important events in China that may by themselves elicit problems. The anniversary of Tiananmen Square,
right.
The anniversary of Mao's revolution, and also the problem with Tibet.
Right, which is actually happening this week, the
That's
50th
right.
anniversary.
I just saw people just around Chicago.
In Chicago. But so, you know, if unemployment rises and under your prescription, could the world, could the global economy sustain that amount of economic or political disruption in what has been such a huge growth engine of the global economy?
The thing is that it's true that China has had a huge growth. But not only China, also India has also been affected. But China is not alone in this, let's say, in this triggering effect. You have Brazil, has improved tremendously, and also been affected. So it's not only China, it's Brazil and also India. But of course, China is, for us, is more important. And we are more important for them as well.
Yeah.
So the relationship, the government relationship between our two countries is tense. And also political.
Well, yeah, and we do, in fact, in the next 2.5 weeks or so, have a presidential summit between the presidents of the United States and China. We'll leave it there. Thank you, Professor. Antonio Morales-Pita, along with us, the professor of economics at DePaul University.